Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ideas on Fire Rockstar webinar on the topic of working well with advisors. So this is a topic that I know we've talked a lot about in our Slack community. It's also a topic that many of you have spoken to me about individually, or your personal coaches individually. And it's something that seems to come up over and over and over again, of students who are trying to figure out how best to have great relationships with their advisors. What do advisors do? What do advisors not do? How to deal when there are potential conflicts with your advisor. And we'll talk about all of these things in this webinar. So just a reminder, if you have any questions or comments during the webinar itself, you can put those in the little chat box that's on your right-hand side of the screen. You can type in the box down there. You also, if you have a specific question, if you scroll below the video screen, you'll see a big orange button. You can put questions there as well, and I'll answer questions at the end of this if there are any. So I'm going to share my screen, which will hopefully work. Okay, and then we're going to where is the slideshow? Haha. Okay. So hopefully this is what you see on the screen. If not, I'll be sending it to you anyway. So no worries. So as I said, we're going to talk about working well with your advisors. I put this PhD comics up here on the opening slide, number one, because it's funny, and will probably remind you a little bit, perhaps, about experiences you might have had with your advisors, or for those of you who do advising, this also might seem familiar from the opposite side of things. But I also think it's an interesting way into this topic. So this comic is, kind of making fun, tongue-in-cheek, making fun of the difficulty of trying to figure out when to tell your advisor you're going on vacation, right? And it's kind of making fun of, do I do this earlier than later? What are they thinking about that? Do they even notice I'm gone? Is 2 weeks not talking to your advisor really a vacation, or is it just regular life? And it raises some of the interesting quandaries and questions that we're going to be talking about in the webinar here today. So I thought I'd put that up there to begin with. So to start off, I want to talk a little bit about what an advisor can and should do, and then what an advisor cannot and should not try to do. And I call this Mythbusters, the academic version. So an advisor can be enormously helpful to you as you move through your career. And I'm going to be talking a lot about advisors, plural, a team of advisors. And I want you to keep that in mind as we kind of go through this. So while you should think about these kind of questions that we're going to explore in relationship to each individual advisor that you engage with across your career, but I also want you to keep in mind that we're not talking about a single person, right? We're talking about a group of people that you've assembled through specific methods that we're going to be talking about today, who complement each other in some form or another, right? So what can an advisor, can they do and should they do? A good advisor, a set of good advisors, should support you in the life that you actively built. A good advisor should give you resources and point you towards opportunities that help you achieve the goals that you've set up for yourself. A good advisor should teach you skills that are relevant to your and or their career paths. We'll talk a little bit more in a minute about what happens when those things converge and diverge. And a good advisor can and should admit when they do not know something, and offer resources for finding someone who does. Your advisor will not know everything. They will not have all the answers to every single question that you come up with, which is perfectly fine, right? And if they pretend that they do, that's kind of a red flag, because it means that they don't have the confidence to admit when they don't know something. And it also gets you into a situation where they could easily steer you wrong just because they're embarrassed to admit that they don't know something. So a good advisor should know the limitations and also help you find someone who does, right? Even if they don't, they should help you, point you in the direction of people or resources that could answer the question that they can't. And a good advisor sometimes can serve as a role model. This doesn't always happen. This isn't always the case for every advisor, but oftentimes those things do converge. So if these are the things that an advisor can and should do, what can't an advisor do? An advisor cannot ensure that you meet deadlines. You have to do that. We'll talk about how to do that in a minute. An advisor cannot make you finish your dissertation. If only that were the case, right? That seemed kind of nice. If I just get the magical fairy godmother advisor who will somehow ensure that I finish my dissertation, all will be right with the world. Unfortunately, an advisor cannot make you finish your dissertation. You're the only person who can do that. They can, however, support you and give you the resources and opportunities you need to make progress on and ultimately finish your dissertation, right? So an advisor also, relatedly, can't get you a job, right? Again, if only that were the case, life would be a lot easier for many a graduate student and many an early career faculty member as well, right? Instead, an advisor can, again, support you in searching for whatever job or jobs it is that you're seeking, can guide you, give you resources, describe any experience they might have in that area, point you towards opportunities. But like anyone else, they cannot guarantee to get you a job, right? An advisor, similarly, can't get you published, right? You get to get yourself published, but your advisor can help you, indeed, should help you in that process. Your advisor also can't be your therapist. They can't be your best friend, they can't be your parent, and they can't be your fairy godmother. These are roles, well, perhaps accepting the fairy godmother, these are roles that are incredibly useful roles for your life, right? A therapist, a best friend, parental figures in whatever form those might take, friends, supportive people, right? But your advisor can't be all of those things. Your advisor also can't be an expert in careers that they haven't experienced or that they don't have a lot of experience with. And we'll come back more to this in a minute. But this is an issue that comes up a lot with people who are seeking careers outside of the academy and are trying to figure out how to work with their advisor or even tell their advisor, and often worry that their advisor either will have a negative opinion about that or just won't be able to advise them on how to do that, right? So an advisor can't, and then finally, perhaps, an advisor cannot run or fix your life. Again, it would be super nice if they could, right? But unfortunately, that's not how this works. So what an advisor can do then is help you figure out how to do these things yourself, right? They can give you the guidance, they can give you the resources, they can teach you the skills, and they can point you to the opportunities that let you build the life that you want. Okay, so how exactly do you do this, right? I want you to start by thinking about the difference between what you want out of an advisor and what you actually need out of an advisor. And the difference between these things is important. Start with the want, because it's probably going to be bigger. One way to approach this is to think about your preferences. This requires some soul searching, right? Think about how you like to communicate with people who are teaching you something. Your preferred communication styles. Do you like constant interaction? Do you like questions? Do you like just to be able to kind of report on whatever's happening in a particular situation and the other person is just kind of there to support that? Or do you prefer people to ask you questions, to push you, to suggest alternatives or suggest solutions, right? How do you like to communicate? Do you like to work in groups versus one-on-one, right? Things like this. Also think about how you have formed or want to form your relationship to work. What kind of emotions do you have about your work? What kind of habits have you established around your work? What is the role of your work in your life, right? These are things about you, and be honest here. Be kind of nitty-gritty honest about this, because this is going to help you figure out advisors that can help you achieve the things that you want to achieve. Also think about your workflow. How do you like to approach your work? Are you an early morning person where you like to jump out of bed and sit down and write before the day gets started? Do you like to finish all things before you move on to the next one? Or do you prefer to have multiple projects in various stages open at once? Do you like to work with or learn about new technologies that can help, or tools that can help you organize your research materials, that can help you organize your writing projects, etc.? Also think about how you learn and how you grow. Right? And this is going to, again, take some soul searching. And this isn't a one-time deal. It's not like if you figure out that this how you work now, then that won't change in the future. But think about, how do you learn things? Do you learn things by reading them in books? Do you learn things by hearing someone describe their experience? Do you learn things through stories, through narrative versus instruction? And then how do you grow? How do you expand what you know? How do you expand the way that you approach the world? Do you like to ask a lot of questions? Do you actually want answers to those questions? Or is the act of asking how you learn and how you grow? And then also think about what kind of life you want and what kind of life you already have, right? We often in the academy forget that we're building a life, not just a career, right? And different advisors, every single advisor you encounter will have a different relationship to this question. And you have a different relationship to this question than anyone else, right? So think about what kind of life you're trying to build. Is it the life that you have? Are you super happy with that and you just want more of it? Or are you looking to make a change in some area of your life? This isn't just about your career, right? This is also about your family situation. It's about your partner situation. It's about your friend group. It's about your communities. It's about the kind of life you want to live in the universe and the kind of big work you want to do, right? The academy is one part of that. But figuring out those kinds of big questions will help you figure out what you want out of an advisor and then what you actually need, right? So you might want an advisor, for example, who's available for you 24/7. I'll give you a hint, that doesn't exist. But you might want that, right? Desires are not bad. You might want that. But what do you actually need? Well, it turns out you don't need someone available 24/7, which is good because that doesn't exist. But you might need somebody who's able to answer email questions a few times a month about specific topics. You might need an advisor who's okay if you drop by their office hours unannounced. You might need an advisor who is able to point you to specific resources in a particular area that you have a lot of questions about, right? So identify what you want out of advisors and then what you actually need. So once you've done that kind of essentially studying work, you've studied yourself, your communication styles, your workflow, how you learn and grow, you're going to do your homework and observe those things about your potential and your existing advisors. So what are their communication styles? How do they seem to interact with people? Not just their advisees, but everybody that you can observe them interacting with, right? Do they ask a lot of questions? Are they introverted? Are they extroverted? Do they seem to thrive in like large groups of people where they're the life of the party? They are kind of, they're gabby. They talk with people in large groups. They're super comfy there. Or do they kind of hang back on the side? Are they more introverted and prefer one-on-ones? Right? Do they ask a lot of questions? Are those rhetorical questions? Right? How do they like to communicate with people? What's their relationship to their work? How do they seem to feel about it? What are the habits they've constructed around it? What is its role in their lives? Now, you might not have as much information about this as you might like, right? Some of this is personal. For instance, their emotional relationship to their work, what it means to them on a kind of deep level. You might not have access to that information, and that's perfectly fine and should be respected. But what can you observe about their behavior, right? About how they engage with their work? That tells you really important information about whether this might be a good advisor for you on a particular issue. Observe their workflow and how they seem to learn and grow. One great way to observe this, how other people learn and grow thing, is going to talks and seeing what kind of questions they ask the panelists, right? What are they trying to puzzle out for themselves? It's a great way to figure out how other people learn. What kind of life do they want? And what kind of life do they have, right? What are their relationships with their existing and or previous advisees? One easy way to do this is ask those advisees, right? But there's also an observational quality to this. What do you observe about their relationship with those advisees? And then think about the demands on their time, both personally and professionally. What's going on in their life? Do they travel a lot, to give a lot of talks? Do they go to a lot of conferences? Are they keynoting a whole bunch of stuff? Do they have kids? Do they commute to campus, which severely cuts down the number of work hours available in a day, right? Are they caring for a parent? Are they dealing with something big in their life? Does somebody in their family have a health issue? Do they have a health issue? Something that is going to be a demand on their time. Are they redoing their kitchen? Right, talk about a demand on your time. A pleasant one, ultimately, but one that can produce some stress and certainly has a demand on your time, right? Where are they in their career? If they're a professor, do they have tenure? Are they an adjunct? Are they going up for tenure this year? Are they on a bunch of committees across campus? Do they chair a professional organization? How many other advisees do they currently have? What's their advising load? What's their teaching load? All of these things will shape the amount of time that they're able to give to you. And that will shape whether you can decide whether they're going to be a good advisor for you or not. I want you also to think about how you can use each advisor's traits after you've done this observational work. How can you use each advisor's traits to make progress on your goals? Now, the reason why you're observing these things is not to find an exact match. It's not as if let's say, you are a more introverted person, you like one-on-one conversations, and you like to ask a lot of questions. That's how you learn and that's how you grow. The goal isn't necessarily to only work with advisors who are the exact same way. It's to figure out how certain advisors' traits can help you in what you want to do. So in that context, if you're more introverted, if you prefer one-on-one, if large groups kind of make you nervous or like they're not super fun for you, they require a lot of emotional energy, that isn't how you prefer to work. If you're going into an academic profession, if you're intending to stay in academia for your career, there are a good number of professional situations that involve groups, right? Teaching, conferences, there's a lot of networking, committee work, etc. All requires you to group work. That might not be your preferred mode of interaction. That's perfectly fine. But you're going to have to figure out how to do it anyway. In that case, one of your advisors might be able to help you if they have a more extroverted relationship to group work. A more extroverted advisor in that case who gets energy from group situations might have something really important to teach you about how to improve in that area of your life. So it's not a matter of matching up, find an advisor who's exactly like you, but it's about figuring out how you can use advisors' existing traits and preferences to make progress on the goals that you have. Okay. I also want to talk about setting reasonable expectations. I would say that of all of the issues that students and clients have talked with me about that they've had with their advisors, 90% of it, some really high percent of it, comes down to unstated or unreasonable expectations. So this is actually crucial. So look back at that want versus need list. I want these things out of advisors, but I really need these things. Put those together with your advisor observations, right? And as I was talking about earlier, see how individual advisors can help you achieve those particular goals, right? Then take a look at your existing and your future projects. For some of you, that might involve a dissertation, if you're at that stage, or that might be a future stage. For some of you, it might be, for those of you who are postdocs who are revising your dissertation into book manuscripts, that would be part of it. For those of you who are earlier in your graduate school career and you're still in coursework, those courses would be part of it. Those of you studying for quals, all of these kinds of projects that you're working on, right? Roadmap those out using the exercise that we talked about in this program. The reason why you're doing this is to figure out where in your roadmap individual advisors can help you, right? Rather than approaching advising as a, eek, I have no idea what I'm doing, just help me in general, which isn't really helpful for an advisor to hear because it doesn't tell them what you actually need, right? It just tells them you need help in some really vague sense. But sometimes you don't even know that yet, right? Road mapping your projects can help you figure out what exactly you need, when exactly you need it. So let's say you've road mapped your existing and future projects, and you know over the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to be finishing up your dissertation. You're going to be hopefully publishing some academic journal articles if you're building an academic career. Maybe you also want to get into blogging or do some more public writing or paid writing. Maybe you are going to be looking for a job in some capacity, right? These are all solid and large projects. Knowing what those projects are, knowing the individual steps that make them up, the individual tasks that make them up, knowing what you already know about those things and what you still need to learn, and having concrete deadlines or at least reasonable expectations of deadlines, right? I know in general in this year I'm going to be doing these things, right? Then you can figure out where in that map an individual advisor can help you. For example, if you are going to be presenting your first paper at your first conference in the next year, you are going to learn how to do that from scratch, right? If you've never done it before. So you're obviously going to be writing that paper, doing the research for that paper, actually writing the thing itself. You're going to be practicing that paper, especially if you've never delivered one before. You're going to be reading it out loud. You're going to be timing yourself. You're going to probably want some feedback from other people to figure out if you're doing it right? Or if you make any sense. You probably want some feedback on your delivery. Are you speaking too fast? Are you fitting within the time frame? Is there something that you're saying that's a bit confusing that could be made more clear? This kind of audience type feedback is really helpful, right? Which means that if you map those things out, you can figure out which of your advisors can help you on individual tasks. So let's say one of your advisors is just kind of a rock star at conferences. Like it's their jam, right? They do a lot of them. They've helped a lot of advisees do a lot of them. They like that format. They might be a really good person to ask if you could deliver your conference paper to them and get their feedback. They can tell you how it went over, if there's anything that you can clarify, if you find you're speaking too fast or you're speaking too slow, they can give you advice on those things because that's their jam, that's their area of expertise, right? But you need to map out ahead of time when you're going to be doing these things so that you can identify when an advisor's help could be useful, right? It also lets them know ahead of time when they're going to be helping you, which helps them decide whether they have time to do it. Okay. Reciprocate. Advising from the student perspective, from the grad student perspective, is often a one-way street, right? We think about when we're graduate students, how can we get help from advisors? For those of you who have or will move to the faculty position, advising from a faculty position is more complicated, right? Academic advising is reproductive labor. It's called service, goes in the service section of your CV, and it's counted as service in tenure and promotion, right? Advising is incredibly laborious reproductive labor. It's also incredibly rewarding reproductive labor, but it's labor. And I want to focus on this. I want to kind of pause here for a minute, because both advisees and advisors benefit from keeping this at the forefront of how they approach advising, whether you're on the student side of things or on the faculty side of things, right? Advising is labor and deserves to be treated as such. Like all labor, deserves to be fairly compensated, right? So one way to think about this is from the student perspective is to think, number one, what do you get out of it? What do you get out of advising? What do you get out of an individual advising relationship? But then also keep in mind, what do your individual advisors get out of it, right? What do they get out of advising in general? And what do they get out of advising you specifically? Now, I emphasize this not to freak you out and not to discourage you at all from seeking advising. You should, right? That's what advisors are there for. But they also deserve to get something out of it, right? And understanding this, number one, helps you set reasonable expectations. It helps you respect your advisor's time. It helps head off some communication problems, potential communication problems. It helps you understand the role of advising in a faculty career, right? And it helps you figure out how to reciprocate. Now, when I talk about reciprocation, I mean in a way that matches your individual advisor's goals, preferences, and lives, as well as your resources, time, and abilities. This doesn't have to be scary, right? But think about how you could help your advisor in the same way that your advisor is helping you, right? If your advisor is offering resources and pointing you towards opportunities that are helpful to meet your goals, how can you do that for your advisor? What are your advisor's goals? What are they trying to do with their lives, with their careers? What resources or opportunities that you come across or that you find, you actively seek out and find, can you point them to? Can you send them a journal article that you come across that's relevant to the writing project they're doing? If you come across a publishing opportunity that is relevant to whatever it is that they're working on, send it their way. Is there a colleague that they might benefit from knowing that you could introduce them to at a conference, right? This is the type of reciprocity that keeps advising relationships strong. It also certainly heads off communication issues, but it also helps you keep that two-way street at the forefront of the relationship, rather than just thinking of advising as advisors giving me stuff, right? Advisors get a lot out of the relationship. That's why we do it, right? So keeping that in mind will help keep your advising relationship strong. You are not your advisors are not you. This can get tricky. This can get confusing. This is something that a lot of both advisees and advisors struggle with, right? We like advisors, we like mentors who are similar to us in some way sometimes. We like advisees who are similar to us sometimes, right? We recognize ourselves in them. It's part of what draws us to them, right? That's not an inherently bad thing, but it can tip over into a bad thing if either advisees or advisors assume that the other person is just a mini them, right? So that's what I mean when I say you are not your advisors and your advisors are not you. So how does this actually play out? Or how can you kind of keep this in mind? The first way is you can't get what you don't ask for, right? Oftentimes advisees aren't quite sure what they want. And so ask for some kind of vague advice, right? Vague help, right? It's perfectly fine to not yet know what you want and not yet know what you need. That's perfectly fine. But you need to be upfront about that. And when it's useful, figure out exactly what you want. And that's inner work, right? You can't know what to ask for unless you know yourself, not to sound all Yoda-y about it. But that's that kind of work that I was talking about earlier, about figuring out what do you want out of an advisor? What do you need out of an advisor? How do you like to communicate with people? What is your relationship to your work? What kind of life do you want? These things are about you. They're not about your advisor. They have nothing to do with your advisor at all, right? They only have to do with your advisor to the extent that you use them to build the relationships that will help you achieve those things, right? So figuring out what you want, what you're actually asking for, is crucial to getting it. If you want writing feedback, what does that actually mean? Do you want someone to say, this looks great? That's fine. We all need someone to say that. To say, good job, you finished this thing, rock on. That is a perfectly fine thing to want and to need and to ask for. But you have to ask for it in those terms, right? You can't say, give me your honest feedback about this thing, when what I really want is for you just to congratulate me on having finished it, because that's an accomplishment. So being clear about what you want and clearly asking for that is crucial to keeping your advising relationships healthy. You're also allowed to disagree with your advisor because you are not your advisor and your advisor is not you. You're allowed to have a different reading of something. You're allowed to have a different opinion. You're allowed to do something that your advisor disagrees with. You're allowed to study something completely unrelated to what they study. You're allowed to have a different kind of life than they do. You're allowed to disagree. Part of this is just being an adult, right? And that's a process for sure. But learning to be confident in what you want out of life, to not need justification for it, to be pretty upfront with saying, this is what I'm doing. This is my shit. And letting your advisor also do that too, right? That helps you figure out when disagreement works, right? Your advisor can't build you the life that you want. You have to do that. All they can do is give you advice, give you support, give you resources, teach you skills, and sometimes show you an example, right, of elements of that. It's up to you to decide which of those things you want to take and which of those things you want to put to the side, which of their opinions you want to incorporate and which of their opinions you don't. You're allowed to disagree with your advisor. Don't disappear. So this is something that, as someone who has advised many a student and has spoken with, I'd say, almost all of my faculty colleagues about this constantly, is the case of the mysterious disappearing advisees. I understand it can be scary and embarrassing, perhaps, when you feel like you disappointed your advisor, or you didn't meet a deadline that your advisor was expecting you to meet, or you feel like they somehow, you've somehow disappointed them. It's okay to be embarrassed about that. It's okay to be disappointed in that. It's okay to be mad about that, mad at yourself, right? But don't disappear. Strongly avoid the urge to just hide out and hope that no one will notice. Your advisor cares about you. All of your advisors care about you. They wouldn't be advising you otherwise, right? They care about your progress towards the specific goals they're working with you on. They want to hear how you're doing. So if something goes wrong, if you blow a deadline, if you just figure out you're not going to be able to do this thing when you thought you would, and it might be something that they wanted you to do, own up to that, right? Just explain, I can't do this, or I blew this deadline. If there's a particular reason that's relevant, explain. If there's a way that you could finish that project, like if you need an extension or something like that, explain that. Or if it's something that is just never going to happen, be upfront about that too. This is part of that. You're allowed to disagree and you can't get what you don't ask for, right? Don't disappear, because we have no idea where you go. And more importantly, we have no idea when you're coming back and what you need from us when you do. So don't disappear. Also, perhaps relatedly, avoid projecting your anxieties onto other people. This is just good like life advice, but it's particularly relevant in the advisor-advisee relationship. It's common, we're human, most of us at some point or another assume what other people think or feel about us, right? We do it often. We learn to do it less as we get older, as we get more confident in our work, right? As we get more confident in our relationships. When we build smarter relationships, we get better at it. But I want you to think about this in relationship to the advising relationship. Don't assume that you know what your advisors think or feel. Ask them, right? The way that phone call that they said, their tone of voice in that meeting, the way that they physically handled your paper when you gave it to them, the expression on their face in the audience at the conference panel. Don't assume you know what those things mean, because you don't. Ask them, right? What you might interpret as, I am so disappointed in you, you're a horrible advisee, how on earth could I possibly advise you? Like, these are the anxieties and thoughts that run through your brain, right? Because you're anxious about those things. Don't project those onto your advisor, right? Chances are your advisor did not make that facial expression for that reason whatsoever. They were thinking something completely different, right? Asking them, what did you mean by that, right? Can help, number one, keep a stronger relationship, but can also just help make you happier, right? Can help you figure out what you might be anxious about. And it's perfectly fine to be anxious about things. It's graduate school. Of course, you're going to be anxious about things, but you get less anxious over time. And you get less anxious through the work of building strong relationships, right? Communication is key to all relationships, including advising ones. If you notice, a lot of this advice, particularly on this slide, is life advice, right? But for some reason in academia, we often forget these really useful lessons that we know elsewhere, that we apply in our family situations, that we apply in our romantic relationships, that we apply with our friends, but somehow we like forget about these skills that we have, these relationship skills that we have, and we like leave them out of academia, right? But this can be remedied. So communicate. If you need something, identify what it is and ask for it, and be okay with a no, right? This is also one of the reasons why I'm encouraging you to think about an advising team, so that if what you need in a particular moment, let's say you need feedback on that first conference paper, if what you need isn't available from a single advisor, let's say that person is out of town this month, or just doesn't have it has a really heavy teaching load and just isn't available to give you that feedback, you have a team of advisors so that you can go to a different person. Okay. Okay. And finally, do the work and let things change. Like with relationships, you're noticing a theme here. You'll get out of an advising relationship what you put in, right? And since you have a team of advisors, hopefully, those individual relationships might be different from each other, and that's perfectly fine, right? Advising relationships guaranteed will change over time. That doesn't mean that something's gone wrong. That's normal. All relationships change over time because you become a different person over time. And so does your advisor. Your goals, your priorities, your communication styles, your relationship to your work, the life that you want, the life that you're actively trying to build, those things will change, right? Your advisor's version of those things will also change. That's normal. But it means that it's helpful on both sides of it, both advisors and advisees, to allow that change to occur, right? And then constantly be reevaluating what you need and what you want. And then how that is working in the existing advising relationships that you have. You might find, for example, that this month, since you have that first conference coming up and you're really nervous about it and you want a lot of feedback, that's really where your priorities are, right? But next year at the same time, conferences might not be your priority because you got that down, right? Which means that this month, when conferences are at the forefront of your goals and your time and your priorities, turning to an advisor who rocks conferences makes a lot of sense. But next year, at the same time, when you're focusing on, say, getting your dissertation proposal together, an advisor who, like, their thing is conferences might not be the best person to turn to. It doesn't know, neither you nor that advisor has done anything wrong. It's just your priorities change, right? So you can turn to the person that has the skills and expertise for you to achieve whatever it is you're doing in the moment. Okay, so I'm going to stop screen sharing. Okay, how do I close that? Maybe. Haha, okay. And see if there are any questions. As I said, we've talked a lot about advising in the Slack communities for both the Grad School Rockstar Program and Dissertation Rockstar Bootcamp. You can always talk to any of the coaches during office hours about this. And we're here to help you. I know a lot of you have very strong relationships with your advisors, which is fantastic. A lot of you have gone through several advisors, which can also be fine. Oh, that's something I didn't actually mention, but I meant to add that to one of the slides and I forgot. Who you're advised by can change over time, right? Not just in terms of if you have a set team, I'm going to talk more with this person this month and more with this person the other month, although that's part of it, right? But also you can swap out advisors. Most schools allow you to do that. I would actually pretty sure that all schools in some form or another allow you to do that. So if you start out with, say, one dissertation advisor and you find that for whatever reason you need to swap them out for someone, there's a system for that. It's a matter of doing the research to figure out what that system actually is. You can also do this unofficially, right? Let's say that person needs to stay on as your official dissertation director on paper for whatever reason, right? Advising relationships can be as formal or informal or official or unofficial as you want them to. So having another advisor or set of advisors who you get advice from, right, who advise you on things, doesn't necessarily need to be involved in the school paperwork if that's, if that's a barrier for some reason. Sometimes it is. But you can swap out advisors over the course of your graduate school career and indeed over the course of your career more broadly. So are there questions about any of this? Doesn't seem like there are. If you find that you still have questions about this, as I said, you can always talk to any of the Rockstar coaches in the Slack communities. You can also email us directly and we're happy to help you out with this. So in about 45 minutes, you should receive an email, 30, 45 minutes, somewhere in there, with the link to the replay of this, as well as the slides, a PDF of the slides that I showed. Thanks for joining us to talk about advisors, and I hope you have a fabulous rest of your week. Thank you much. Oh, sorry, before I go, the next webinar is coming up on April 18th, and it's crafting your ALTAC, alternative academic, or post-academic career while you're in graduate school. And we have two speakers for that, Jen Polk, who heads up from PhD to Life, and she also co-chairs the Beyond the Professoriate conference that happens every spring. And our very own Ideas on Fire content manager, Alexandra Sastre, will be talking about how she did that during graduate school. And so if you have questions about alt-ac or post-ac careers, or you're curious about how you build those while you're in graduate school, how you use graduate school to build that, this is a great webinar to check out. April 18th, you can register on our website. And I think that's all I have to say. Okay. As I said, have a great week, and I'll see you in Slack.